We are back, and I'm thrilled to have Dr. MarkAlain Déry, infectious disease physician, chief innovation officer, and medical director for infectious diseases at Access Health Louisiana, also the creator of the podcast Noise Filter, also the co-founder of WHIV Community Radio down in New Orleans. MarkAlain, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are in Sam's chair. How does it feel?
Weird. I can smell the microphone. It's I'm getting a little too close to it, so I'm going to just pull away.
Oh, the smell of the one hard-boiled egg he eats every morning. Although I usually
liquid IV.
Yeah, and liquid IV, and then maybe the occasional coffee. Mark, it's great to have you on. You were on Democracy Now! This morning. Were you
I
not?
wasn't on. We were just visiting the studios.
Just visiting. Oh, well, look at that
we were just
brag.
visiting that studio.
Whose studio's nicer?
Yeah. Oh, this one, of course.
Oh, yeah.
I was expecting a tiny studio when I walked in, but I can't believe how big and grand it is.
Certainly.
The marble pillars.
Yep.
Really lovely.
That toilet that barely works. Anyway, well, let's just start here. You were listening to a little of my conversation with Naomi Klein. You were saying some stuff struck you. Like, from an infectious disease perspective, this level of nihilism and science denial has got to be just one of the most depressing elements of your job right now.
Yeah, it started, think back to in the 80s with HIV, right? There was a huge denial of HIV. The government and Reagan would not even acknowledge HIV until 8 years. So roughly, was that 1987, 1988 was the first time that Reagan even actually acknowledged HIV. As a result of that, and then the death of a young man named Ryan White, who was a hemophiliac, was somebody that the white, was not a person who had, who was gay or who was from Haiti or who was not a heroin user. They were hemophiliac. And it was like at that time, the good society could get around somebody with HIV, with hemophilia. This was a 15-year-old boy named Ryan White, and he died soon after. And so what happened was that there was this collective guilt that the government had, and so they created these amazing programs for HIV. The reason why we don't talk about HIV anymore now is because of that programming, and they funded a ton of money into it. These Ryan White, and I have 2 Ryan White clinics. I've run Ryan White clinics in New Orleans. Of course, the USAID had PEPFAR, in which Bush was able to get out into Africa and save something like 20 million lives. It's right. When you put money to a problem, you could actually get things done. So now fast forward to COVID, and I was so confused. We know what to do. The public health is fairly straightforward, but the fact that they were doing nothing initially with COVID, it became clear to me that the plan was no plan. And that was the destruction that we saw. And we ended up with 1 million cases of mortality deaths as a result of just not doing anything or not putting our best foot forward. And I was so confused. And how is it that we are allowing people to die like this? All right, so we had 4 years of Biden, but now we're back in this situation where we are now. And it's becoming clear to me, and it was exactly what Naomi Klein was talking about, and I was telling you off air, it was an epiphany for me when she was talking about societal collapse. And when she said that, and then of course afterwards she said viral. She said it could be tech or financial, right. I forget what she said, but then she said viral. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, that makes sense to me. That crystallizes everything that we've been seeing right now. Because why are we seeing RFK making these choices? Why we're seeing this huge measles outbreak? If I were in RFK's shoes right now, I would be down in Texas every day. I'd be in New Mexico every day. I'd be in these health clinics. I would be propping up these physicians. I'd be showing kids being vaccinated. I would be doing these PR moves because the only thing that prevents measles is a vaccine. It's not these other things that he's talking about. And so we're not seeing that. And if we're not seeing that, and if we're seeing the closure of the infectious diseases, the federal, within the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, they just recently closed down the infectious diseases and the HIV section. Why would they do that? I mean,
well he's basically saying, he said now publicly that he does not believe that AIDS is caused by HIV.
Right, which is again, for somebody like myself, that's just mind blowing. But
absolutely. I mean, can you explain why that's such a dangerous position to take? I mean, he knows better as somebody at his age, and he's just recirculating some of the conspiracy theories that were heard in the 80s.
Yes.
And he's blaming even gay lifestyle, which is a very thinly veiled homophobic
I would say
attack.
thickly veiled, but yes.
Yes.
It's homophobia is what that is. No, it's the dissemination of misinformation. I mean, a lie, I think Mark Twain once said that a lie circulates around the world 6 times faster before the truth can get up and put on its pants. The disinformation is so sexy right now, and it has always been sexy, and it's more sexy than real information. If you go online and look at something, it has a very, scientific title, and maybe when you click on it, it's behind a paywall because it's part of a academic journal or whatever, whereas disinformation is so easily circulated. This idea that AIDS is not caused by HIV, that's not something that was settled in the early 80s. My father was an early HIV physician, and that was settled then. I mean, the idea of that is just, again, it perpetuates misinformation and, like you said, thinly veiled homophobia.
Why do you think that's so attractive to people? Is it the idea that they have agency over a narrative, or is it that they get a counter narrative because they have resentment towards like an academic elitism that it shows broadly that these people don't really know what they're talking about?
I think it's both, but I think it's more the first that you said. I think that right now, just medicine interacting with healthcare, a lot of people don't have physicians, don't have doctors, they don't have insurance, right? And so just even interacting with healthcare is so difficult, especially for more vulnerable communities. So having agency over your own sense of what is real versus what is not real. And that's what I think it is. And I'm still trying to flesh that out in my mind right now. Yeah. But I largely think it's largely because you can't get up, you can't go to a doctor. They say the US has great medical treatments and we're excellent. And we are. We're going to lose that status fairly soon with all the cuts that we are seeing. But there's no question about it that not everybody has access to that. This is something that on this show, that's something that's talked about all the time. So I think that it's easy for people to believe in this misinformation, this idea. Just this morning, a colleague of mine, as we did a segment on autism, just on Noise Filter, we had to restart Noise Filter as a YouTube show and as a podcast because the NIH and the CDC are no longer able to speak freely anymore, right? And as a result of that, Eric, my colleague, Doc Griggs, who's my partner, who we do the animations with as well, did a segment on local news this morning on this new autism, which we could pivot to in a second, this reason why autism is in the news right now. And he just sent me an email of somebody yelling at him just in the email, kind of all caps sort of thing about this is garbage. How dare you kind of perpetuate this sort of garbage? And we know what this is due to. And he was implying that it was due to the vaccines. But it's not. But that virus, and I'm using that word intentionally, that virus of misinformation is so deeply rooted in our society that I think we're starting to crack. And I think it was exactly like what you and Naomi were talking about. I think it's now being used as a tool for collapse. An
accelerant.
Yes, an accelerant.
I mean, and the level, like, just to return really quickly to the measles part of this, he's burying RFK Jr. in his press releases. Oh, you should get vaccinated if you haven't already. There have been 3 deaths so far, 2 in Texas, 1 in New Mexico, 2 are children, 1 is an adult. All 3 are unvaccinated. If you could just reiterate for our audience the efficacy of the measles vaccine and why it's so difficult to put the toothpaste back in the tube at this point.
Yeah, I mean, so the measles vaccine we know is a very, very safe vaccine. It's been utilized for decades, right? At one point, the U.S. actually we were free of measles in 2000, right? And so this is one dose of the vaccine that's given at about 12 months of age, protects you about 93%. And at around 5 years old, before a child starts first or kindergarten or first grade, they get a second dose, and that gets you up to 97%. To get so-called herd immunity or community immunity, you need 93 to 95% of a community to be vaccinated for MMR, for the measles. When that goes down, and I think this Mennonite community has very, very low rates, and I think the community in Texas where it actually started had an immunity rate of about 80%. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that number seems to stick in my mind.
I believe you're right. Yeah.
And that virus is going to find you. As of this morning, I think I read 750 cases, I think, right now in 25 states.
Even if you're vaccinated?
No. These are unvaccinated.
Okay.
These are sorry. Let's be very clear.
Yes.
If you're vaccinated, even if you got your vaccines as a child, you're very well protected right
Gotcha.
now. There's some caveats there: immunosuppression. I have an immunosuppressive disease. The hospital I work at, they checked me. My antibody titers, that's the antibodies, were low, and they just gave me a booster vaccine. So for those individuals who do have immunodeficient diseases, just go to a doctor, and if you don't have one, I am happy to help you kind of walk you through this. I read the comments if you want to leave your info there. But anyway, if you want to get in touch, I can help you figure out if you do need it. But I think it's important for us to recognize, especially now during this epidemic, that we do need to protect ourselves, because the people who we usually rely on, and this is getting back to putting the toothpaste, the toothpaste is out. The community, the entities that we use to rely on, these federal entities, even these statewide entities, like in the state of Louisiana where I live, they're not here to help us anymore. They're not giving us the information that we really need. I mean, right now we're allowing the bird flu to kind of run kind of wild. And again, head scratcher, why are we doing this? But this gets back to this idea of this facilitates or accelerates, to use your great word. This is an accelerant for societal collapse. And that, to me, finally crystallizes what we're seeing. So we need to rely on one another to be able to get this information out as effectively as possible.
It occurs to me that we need to be starting to speak about some of these policies as eugenicist adjacent.
I agree.
Because it's really just like, they don't say it explicitly, but it's this notion that survival of the fittest, and I'm the fittest because, I don't know, I take a bunch of testosterone shots.
Or I'm rich and privileged.
Or I'm rich and privileged, right? And yeah, exactly. I have bespoke healthcare. Yes, the United States does have the ability to produce the best healthcare in the world if you have the money to pay for it. For everybody else, well, you're screwed. I mean, we have tens of millions of people uninsured in this country, for example. That element is scariest to me, is the idea that there are folks like RFK Jr. and people that subscribe to it that they don't want to actually help people with disabilities or with diseases. They find them to be weak and want them to be on their own. It's libertarian and eugenicist adjacent.
Yeah, 100%. And what happened this week with autism, I think really also, again, hurts the cause. You had the CDC and so let me just kind of quickly kind of summarize the autism story. So as we know, or maybe we didn't, but the RFK basically commissioned the CDC that by September, right, we're going to find out what causes autism. I mean, that's a crazy, this is something that people have been working on for decades. But by September, and
he
great,
decrees it.
He's going to have a real shot at it. Finally, right. Okay, so we know I have a sense of what he's going to suspect causes autism. So what the CDC did is they released a paper that basically said, we've studied this, and what we are seeing is that the increasing incidence, the rates of diagnoses of autism is because we are getting better in looking for it. The ability to diagnose, the ability to define what autism, the autism spectrum scale, or the AST, the autism spectrum disorder, which is basically a scale. We are able to better define what autism. Maybe in the past somebody would have said that was mental illness, or maybe that was depression, or you're acting out, or what have you. We can now better define what this so-called scale or the spectrum is in terms of autism. Almost hours after that paper came out, in something that I don't think I've ever seen before. I don't think I've never seen this, that the health secretary then came out and then basically refuted what the CDC said by saying, no, this is toxins. And by toxins, I think that's a thinly veiled swipe at vaccines. And certainly the email that went to my buddy, Doc Griggs, this morning also spoke about toxins. Again, thinly veiled swipe at vaccines as well.
But how is he? Well, let's play what he said yesterday about autism, which is the first clip that we should do here that's most relevant to what we're talking about.
We can take them in order maybe and start with the bit about the ideology of autism prevalence here. So
he also seems to not understand what autism even looks like based on this comment at the very least.
One of the things that I think that we need to move away from today is this ideology that that the autism diagnosis, that the autism prevalence increases, the relentless increases, are simply artifacts of better diagnoses, better recognition, or changing diagnostic criteria. If you look at Table 3 of the ADDM report, it's clear that the rates are real, that they are increasing in the last 10 years, which is beginning with the first one, year by year, there is a steady, relentless increase. I want to, because this epidemic denial has become a feature in the mainstream media, and it's based on an industry canard. And obviously, there are people who don't want us to look at environmental exposures. And so I want to just read you some of the.
Okay, so that was one part. Let's play this second part here, where he talks about kids with autism, how they're never going to pay taxes or use the toilet unassisted, which is just not accurate.
Which is also kind of weird.
Well, let's
funny to start with paying taxes also.
Yeah,
that's weird as well.
Right. I mean, true Republican in the administration, I guess, like only concerned about human beings if they can,
Pay
as
taxes,
taxpayers,
or
right?
think about their bathroom habits.
Yes. Well,
getting weird.
I mean, RFK Jr. is not the most normal person, but this part, I think this is ableist. Let's hear what he says.
These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children, and we need to put an end to it. And I think I'm going to have Walter Zaharodny.
All right. So
it's so Orwellian.
This is a moral panic, right? Where he's conflating the increase in diagnoses because we're getting better at diagnosis and therapy with an increase in rates. And at the same time, they are placing the burden on, like, say, if you have a child with autism, they're saying that those parents basically functionally did something wrong. And he says they're trying to cure it, but he's being pseudoscientific and treating it as a binary and not acknowledging the spectrum that you just said. And then everything else, right, with the thinly veiled disgust that he has for people with autism, overplaying some of people's experiences or straight up lying about them, right, in order to make this claim. It is he's exploiting how people feel disempowered or maybe afraid if their child has this diagnosis by giving them this false notion that they have control over it, all the while destroying confidence in public health. The Marisol hasn't been in childhood vaccines for over 20 years. And that was what the initial claim was that was what was causing autism. Why is he even still on this if they've already tested this and the Marisol has been taken out and it had no effect on these rates?
Yeah, I think it just kind of feeds that narrative, that perpetual disinformation narrative. And you're right, the Marisol has been long gone. That was something I even at that point was like, oh, maybe that's a theory. Let's see what happens. Well, nothing happened. Like we're still seeing cases of autism. And there's two things. One is, I mean, somebody who you talk about, Greta Thunberg, and I have this in my mind because I've heard you say that her superpower, she refers to her autism, as her superpower. And again, I don't know her, but I hope that maybe she writes poetry and maybe she's gone on a date or two and what all the things refuting everything that he said.
I think she can go to the bathroom.
I didn't want to go there, but yes, I hope that she's living her life. I know plenty of people who have kids that have autism, and what he described, as I'm speaking these words right now, my toes are curled because I want to make sure that everything that I say is as close to accurate as possible, right? I mean, I dread saying something, especially in public, where I say something wrong. That's how most physicians, or probably most people, public figures who are experts in their fields probably feel. Certainly, I know that physicians do that. What he just did, with like no self-respecting health and human services secretary would get up there and basically he just, and like you said, it was an ableist. He just basically created in one fell swoop, one paintbrush, just boom, described something that maybe exists in one small part of the spectrum of autism. But the fact that he just, basically by doing that, he just perpetuates this notion of misinformation, and it's shameful. And that he's the person standing up at that position. I never realized how powerful it was, because when it works right, those individuals usually kind of are invisible and they're just doing the right thing in the background. I now recognize the power of that position, because when somebody's not saying the right things or doing the right things, it actually hurts the population greatly.
What do you think about this war on peer review as a concept that he seems to be at the forefront of? Just this notion that scientific consensus is worthless, and we should be trying everything and throwing everything at the wall. Like those guys, the Weinsteins on the internet are a big part of this too, with their vaccine denialism, where they can't stand up to peer review. So they just attack the concept of peer review and science altogether. But these folks are getting rewarded by the Trump administration, not the Weinsteins in particular, and they've lamented that they're not included, because it's all about them. But like this level of denialism is at the core of this project.
Yeah, well, I mean, because their ideas are false. And because their ideas are never going to be accepted by folks such as myself who do this for a living, right? We recognize that peer review is the gold standard. That's what we aspire to do. Every article I've ever written that had scientific claims in there, I want to be peer reviewed, because if I'm wrong, like I said a moment ago, I don't want to put something out there that could potentially be wrong or misleading. Peer review is what that is. I've been on the side where I've refereed articles, and I've written a number of articles. Peer review is the gold standard. But think about it. By taking it down, all you're doing is you're helping to take down a major pillar that the greatness of this country once was, and that was our science. Our science standards were so high. Our medical standards were so high. The CDC was the jewel of the earth. There are so many other CDCs around the world that are emulating the CDC that we have here, the work that is being done, that was being done here. And one thing that I'm hearing quite a bit is this major brain drain. We're hearing from scientists and people who do research are leaving, potentially leaving the country to continue the research elsewhere, because grants are being shut down. I know of a number of HIV projects that are in New Orleans that are being shut down right now because they were being done using federal grants. I have several clinics that are federally funded. I don't know what my funding is going to be. One thing that I say, and I know who your audience is, so I feel comfortable saying what I'm about to say. I think once people recognize that undocumented individuals who are living with HIV are fully covered under Ryan White stuff, I think that's the first to go, and I say that fearful that...
Well, they did it with USAID. There are horror stories.
100%. Do you know what it costs to keep somebody alive? So it costs 12 cents per day per person for HIV medications. 12 cents per day. So to keep a child alive, we're talking about, was that like a couple dollars a month?
Yep.
Is that like what? That's $36 a year?
It's
or
less than
something
$1 a week.
Right. That's all it costs.
Yeah.
I'm not a math surgeon either, so I don't know.
I'm horrible at math.
Yeah.
I don't know why I try.
But the point is that it's really the destruction again, and I have to keep going back to this notion of they're purposely trying to accelerate a collapse.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else that would describe why we're seeing such a rapid destruction and deconstruction of our public health system.
But then the question is, what's the motive except to privatize?
I think moving us quicker into network cities.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think there will be one city where no vaccines at all. I could see another city would be like, oh, we're well vaccinated. But to come here, you're going to have to accept a lower rung in society. I don't know. I'm starting to kind of think through some of these things as to what this could potentially look like. And Prospera is a scary place. That was exactly what Naomi Klein has been talking about. That's already there in Roatan, which is one of the 3 islands that are right off of Honduras. And Prospera takes a huge part of that island, and which is basically a privatized area that, what she was talking about, this lawsuit, the government of Honduras are like, you guys have to go. And they basically said they levied a $14 billion lawsuit or something that would completely destroy Honduras as a country. And they can do that because they have the money and the wherewithal to be able to do something like that.
Yep.
I'll just say, like, that dynamic is also part of Quinn Slobodian's book last year, Crack Up Capitalism. He talks about that colony and just like the desire by Peter Thiel type folks to basically secede from they're secessionists.
Yeah.
I want your perspective on this tweet here. I've been pretty frustrated with the anti-vax movement. This is from Grace Thorvaldsen, who was on Left Reckoning earlier this week. She says a significant sect of the modern anti-vax movement is born out of ableist parents rejecting their autistic children and directing blame toward inarguably effective modern medical practices instead of just being good parents.
So it's funny. That was the second point I was actually going to bring up, and we got
sidetracked.
Yeah, we got sidetracked. But that's a great point. So I think that, and again, well-meaning parents. I'm not a parent, but I can imagine what it's like to be a parent. Well-meaning parents love their child. Child seems to be doing well, then all of a sudden something happens to that child. Rather than believing that it's genetics, that it's just likely that was just part of the development of that child, there's this idea of, well, no, something happened to that child, and that was out of my control, rather than possibly accepting the fact that life is life, and that this is just, when genetics when genes reassort themselves during recombination, these are the things that happen, and so that's something I 100% agree with and really believe in, and I feel bad for these parents. I really do. Like, my heart goes out to them. They love their child. They want to see their child have a date or write a poem or do the things that they were talking about.
But it's hard as hell. It's difficult because we don't have the societal safety net and structures to help these people, because we don't have socialized healthcare.
Yeah.
And that is what all of this is about. Maha, this whole movement is exploiting the anxiety that people feel when they have to interact with the medical system, whether it be with a doctor or with a hospital. And so when you don't feel like you have control over the for-profit healthcare system, and that it could bankrupt you if you have cancer or get into an accident, what are you going to do? You're going to try to seek out somebody that sells you something that makes you feel empowered.
And that's why I think people actually believe in some of that misinformation. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Peter Offit, who's a vaccinologist, has this great story that he tells about how he was doing a vaccine clinic. He's a pediatrician, and he does vaccines. He creates vaccines. He was his wife was she's a nurse. She was drawing up the vaccines. The next kid was sitting on mom's lap. He was just getting ready to give her a vaccine when the child had a seizure. Child had a seizure before that child got a vaccine. Okay, that was the first time the child had an epileptic, expression. Child went to the hospital. Child did fine. Everything was fine. And the cautionary tale he tells is this: what would have happened if that kid had had a seizure 30 seconds after he gave that vaccine? Forever in that mom's mind, you would never be able to peel away how that vaccine and that seizure were intricately linked. And so I think those are the sorts of things. And when we as a society are becoming less and less media literate and science literate, which I think also is part of an intent as well, I think you can believe in stories much easier. Again, this misinformation, and because as we know, it like I said, it travels the internet, it circles the world 6 times before the truth can put its pants on.
MarkAlain Déry, thank you so much. People should check out, you have these amazing animations. Maybe we should just play 20 seconds or so of it. Yeah.
Love that.
But we can also check out your podcast now.
Yeah, can I promote?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I'm on Blue Sky at The Dr. Déry, and I'm always putting up articles that resemble this at The Dr. Déry. And then also Noise Filter Show is our YouTube channel. We're going to start populating that with 10-minute segments. We're going to try to be doing that daily, Noise Filter Show, and we'll also be releasing it as a podcast. It's all going through, we're sponsored by an entity called DocWire News, so they get the first content and then we get to put it up after.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And Noise Filter, check it out, everybody. Pay attention, because we're going to need this kind of counter programming during this time period. with the level of disinformation that we have out there. And if you're down in New Orleans, check out 102.3 WHIV Community Radio, where MarkAlain is. Well, we may be able. Are we going to be able to get that? Okay, 1 second.
So these are animations that we created that were federally funded by the government, the CDC,
back in the day.
NIH, the before times, that were meant to explain like mRNA vaccines or whatever, clinical trials or whatever. Are you going to do the long COVID one or the...
Strong, well enough to sing my song. Raspy voice, persistent cough, everything was feeling off. I couldn't breathe, my lungs were burning, my brain was foggy, my stomach churning. I'd had COVID a few months back. Shouldn't I be back on track? Then I learned about
That's a New Orleans choir.
That's amazing.
can really take a toll. How
where.
can I take control?
When coronavirus attacks your system, the lungs and diaphragm can be primary victims.
Inflammation of the vocal cords makes your voice sound hoarse, as you've observed.
And the vagus nerve affects your breathing. Irritation causes coughs and wheezing.
The good news is we have the information
To get ahead of this COVID
My
situation,
treatment plan involves self-care, staying boosted, I'm aware. Healthy eating, exercise, and rest. Meditation to relieve my stress. In just a bit, I was back to singing. So enjoy this joyful noise we're bringing. Move along.
And then Emma,
Yeah.
I built my, I wrote myself into this choir.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. It goes on for like another 10 seconds.
All right.
Move along.
There you are.
So there we are. Hold on, watch next.
Cats
it
and
is.
all.
Yep. That was paid for by the city of New Orleans.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, everybody check that out. Also, I was about to say, like, how did you get such a good singer? But I realized
Tanya Boyd Conley.
you're
Yes,
down
over
in
in
New
New
Orleans.
Orleans. Yes,
so,
she's amazing.
No shortage of...
Where'd you find a singer in New Orleans?
Yeah, right. Yeah, where'd you find water in Miami?
Yeah.
Anyway, really appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
on today. MarkAlain Déry, what is your blue sky again?
The Dr. Derry.
The Dr. Déry. Randy Gornberg wanted to make sure that they had that correct. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.